And that's actually the essence of consulting, right?
$10 million to have OpenAI consult for your business.
Fair is a relative term, right? Would you pay $10 million to have an unfair advantage for your business?
And then start using AI agents to automate that.
Typically, if I'm in $100 million organization, I might have $1 million, $2 million, $10 million, $50 million problem.
So OpenAI, $10 million to have OpenAI consult for your business. That's kind of the topic of today's episode is AI integration and AI consulting. What do I get for 10 million?
Deep expertise in integrating AI in your organization. It's an unfair advantage that you would get from, essentially having one of the top AI companies in the world consult for you and tell you how to implement AI in your business. What are the best practices? I think it's extremely valuable.
I get a lot of LinkedIn messages about people offering AI consulting to me, which is hilarious. And you might as well. It's funny because what's what we do? Like we're an AI business. But it seems like there's a lot of people trying to take advantage of this new era of AI. What might someone get with AI consulting? Like if you were an AI consultant, like what would you do for a small business, a medium business, and a large business?
I would first want to understand their current processes across the different departments, and then figure out, first of all, I want to map out where the data is. Where is your data today? Whether it's customer data, order data, services data. I would want to understand your current data, your current processes, your team structure, your company structure, or your clinic structure. And then I would start with the 80-20. I would start with what processes today are either expensive or which processes are slow, and slow is expensive. And I would start to tackle slow and expensive processes where I know that the AI is going to make a difference in terms of, accuracy, in terms of, being able to process things that were previously done manually. That would be where I would start.
And then start using AI agents to automate that.
Yes.
And do you think...
And then monitor.
And then monitor. And do you think that OpenAI's charging $10 million, is that a fair number?
I mean, fair is a relative term, right? So if let's take an example. Let's say I'm $1 billion or $100 million organization. And typically, if I'm in $100 million organization, I might have $1 million, $2 million, $10 million, $50 million problem. Some problems, right? And those are problems that, let's say, if OpenAI, through helping me implement agents, improved document processing, document retrieval, let's say that solves my $50 million problem, or even more, or even better, make me $100 million. Is it worth it? Absolutely. It's all about the value you're going to get out of it, right? And if OpenAI is putting a $10 million price tag on the item, my hunch is this should be worth $100 million to a business. Not everybody is going to be able to afford that price tag, of course. But what you're buying is one, the know-how, the top expertise in AI. But number two, it's an unfair advantage to your business. Would you pay $10 million to have an unfair advantage for your business? Absolutely.
Okay, got it. So there is value there, and you think that this AI consulting is not really selling shovels is always the analogy. It's not selling shovels in a gold rush. There's actual value to having these AI, having OpenAI or someone else consult for your business.
But it depends. I think you want to go back and frame it that it depends on, first of all, who's buying and who's selling, right? I've seen organizations that would invest a $10 million, $15 million in a project, and then the people on the ground not invested in making things work. And this is where you can still, pay the $10 million contract and then, fail to deliver on the ground. But if your organization is willing, able to adopt, and you find the right company to help you consult, then absolutely, it is absolutely worth it.
And do you think that with AI consulting, is there a lot of room for AI in the broader picture of making companies more efficient? I feel like we've had AI make us efficient on an individual basis, but is there room for an AI agent that can make an entire company more efficient?
It's not one agent, though. It's an agent for every department. Again, let's take examples of what we do at BitLab. You have AI powering some of your sales and marketing processes. AI is also powering engineering processes. It's not the same AI, right? Like the intelligence that you get through kind of, some of our N8N flows or, Zapier or kind of custom AIs that we've done. They might be very, very useful to your sales team and marketing team, but then they're useless to the engineering. The engineering need their own AI tooling, approaches, et cetera, that are different. And then there's the AI that we're building in the products we're taking to the market, and that requires different data, different know-how. And that's actually the essence of consulting, right? If I am to hire a company to consult for me on AI, first of all, I would want to define what aspects of running the business, what problems that I have today, where can AI be applied? And ideally, I want companies that have kind of delivered similar work before, or I know them to kind of be those who are deep domain experts who understand the domain, right? I would never hire, let's say, a generic AI company or a generic AI consulting company to deliver on our engineering, because I'm like, dude, it's engineering. It's a right. It's kind of, you have to match who you're consulting with versus the problem you're trying to solve.
And have you ever considered doing AI consulting?
I think we do that to some extent already.
I feel like you do it for free.
We do. I mean, look, the products that we build and for our clients, there is a form of consulting in there, because part of how we start engaging is, here's my clinic, here's my healthcare startup. Where does AI come into the picture? And I think that is, part of what we do is that consulting.
And going to healthcare, I mean, do you think that there's room for AI consulting in healthcare?
Absolutely, right? I think it's being able to go into the healthcare organizations, looking again, same exercise, look at their data, look at their processes. It's people, processes, and data. And, with an understanding of where the challenges are, you will go into tackling them one by one, such as, either recommending solutions to buy, solutions to implement, custom, or sometimes it might be just very simple, as into, hey, here are some tooling we're going to roll out into your organization that is going to make things more efficient. And then eventually there's usually also some sort of integrations that you would do between different applications in the organization, such as, let's get your EMR to talk to your revenue cycle, or let's take all your kind of, patient reporting data and then use that to derive, some metrics that we can use to drive other kind of services to the patients. So absolutely.
So in order to do a good consulting job, then we've kind of covered, you need a lot of data. You'd need a company that kind of has access to this data, that knows the niche, knows what's going on. And at BitLab, what we do is mainly we help clinics and medical practitioners build AI or build projects to make their practice better or make their practice more efficient. So if I came to you as a doctor and I had all this data and I had a decently large clinic group, maybe 3 or 4 clinics, and we've kind of covered this before, like what would be your broad suggestions of how I can start using AI to make my practice more efficient?
I would start with, where's the problems today? Where are you hemorrhaging cash, right? This is where usually it might be revenue cycle management. It might be more patients into the door. And this is where I would say, okay, great. Let's look at your current process to bring patients into the door. Is there a drop-off? Where does that drop-off happen, right? That's the essence of consulting, that you're not really selling like a, hey, you're giving the same kind of pill to everybody. Oh yeah, you have this headache. Okay, no problem, it's aspirin. You have that headache. Okay, it's aspirin, right? The essence of consulting is taking the time to understand the problems at a deeper level, right? That's where McKinsey's charge you, maybe not 10 million, but they might charging you $1 million or $2 million to come in, bring their consultants. They'll go on the ground, they'll interview your people, they'll look at your paperwork, they'll look at your processes, and then tell you what to do. And that's what you would want, is you want that more tailored approach, as opposed to, hey, here, here's the same pill, just take it, it's going to make all the pain go away.
Okay. And I think the bottom line here is, with such large price tags, and even it's important to mention that with a lot of AIs, there's like billing with AIs as well, and usage, and then consulting. Like, do you think that in many ways the price tag is killing the value of AI in a way?
No, not really, because I think if you compare it, I guess there's two answers. The first one is that over time, there's a concept of Moore's law where the amount of chips you can, or the amount of processing power you can squeeze into a small chip doubles every year. And I think with that law, looking at the AI in that lens, you'll know that over time, if anything, AI is going to get cheaper and cheaper. It's not going to get more expensive. So maybe right now there is a price to pay that is maybe a little bit higher. But in my opinion, it's still worth the investment because the leverage you get out of it, even in today's condition, even with you paying a little bit higher for the credit, the unfair advantage you're accumulating as you stay in the market and as you leverage more and more AI just gets ridiculous. And I think it's going to be an arms race between those who implement AI and those who are lagging behind. And those who are going to implement AI are going to see the benefits, are going to reap the advantages, which would allow them to make more money, save more money. And if I am to be, a CEO of a clinic, hospital, of a healthcare startup, what would I do with that money? Leverage it back into more
AI,
right? Because that's going to give you more,
compound.
The more I do that, it's an investment. It's a continuous investment that will yield a continuous advantage in the market. And it's easy to see that if you carry this to the extreme, the companies who are going to rule the world in the next decade are, first of all, that kind of core AI companies, and then the businesses who leverage AI better than anyone else. That's the unfair advantage in the coming decade.
And for big companies, like, do you think that this? I mean, this is such a broad question, but there's so many large companies out there, and it's almost like we've reached an era now where a small team is, and it's always been like this, obviously, like a small team is more efficient than a big company, but will big companies truly be able to utilize AI, or is this going to be a big bust moment for large companies?
I think it's the true test. It's the true test of an organization, right? Because if an organization cannot adopt this, they're gonna die. I mean, a good example is Blockbuster not realizing ahead of their time that hey, like, people now don't want to exchange CDs, right? Actually, there's this thing called the internet, and we can distribute movies across it. It's gonna be a Blockbuster moment. If you realize that AI is the way to run your business, guess what? You're gonna do well. You're prospering. You're killing it. And if you are scared, reluctant, or too slow in implementing, you lose your edge in the market. Goodbye.
Yeah, like I've bought companies before, like just stock trading, and I've looked at their financials, and I've just thought to myself, like, what are these people even spending money on? Like, what do these employees even do? I mean, Elon bought Twitter. He fired like 90% of the staff or something. The company still functioned.
But you have to structure it in a certain way, right? I think it's how we built organizations has always been hierarchical. Right, there is, if you kind of look at the larger organization, there's the C-suite, and then there's the SVPs, and then there's the VPs, and then there's the directors, and then maybe senior directors, and then directors, and essentially we built hierarchies, and those hierarchies now in the current environment, they're becoming a prison, right? It's too many people to move. Everybody's kind of degrees removed from the reality, and it's going to be harder to implement AI in those companies. Much harder, because now you have to have the buy-in of everybody, or you take the extremes that Musk did, is you either try to send AI down the hierarchy if you're the management and hope everybody will adopt, and then you cannot try to weed out the laggards, or you look at the drawing board and say, hey, whatever hierarchy I built, it just doesn't make sense. Let's go create a more nimble hierarchy in the organization, and that would allow me to run with freedom. Because I think the essence is that your change when you implement AI, it no longer becomes gradual. There is, I guess, another way to frame it is that, there are instances where AI will fit neatly into your current processes, but there are times where, hey, that process actually might be rendered irrelevant because of how you're using AI, and how your organization changes shape and departments is where things get very interesting.
Do you think that AI will not truly be adopted until the older generation leaves the workforce? Do you think that's a big barrier to entry for AI?
Potentially, yeah. I mean, I can see how that can be true, especially if you have a senior management team who might be reluctant to use AI. They're still scared of it. They read the news headlines and they're not really looking at the efficiency gains. I think that's one way this can go wrong. The other is you try and then you fail in one thing, and it's just we're not set up for success in the first place. And then you use that as an excuse to throw in the towel and say, "Hey, look, we tried AI, it just didn't work." Right? These are kind of typically what we see sometimes, where a company might not adopt AI as fast or may decide not to adopt it at all. But I think the other challenge and at the same time opportunity is that, I believe our industry in terms of software is changing. I think you're going to need less and less software engineers to do things. But also the way we build software is changing. And I think we're going to have a completely new way or a new approach to building software. And therefore, whatever processes we apply today may no longer work, right? And I think we're, at BitLab, we're actually experiencing it working through our teams who, again, everybody's AI leveraging kind of Cursor and all the other toolings, Claude Code.
Well, let's talk about that.
But what I'm Sure.
How has BitLab changed with AI? Like, how has your business changed with AI coming in? And
so I would say there's kind of two unique perspectives there. The first one is that if you have a new project that you're building, right, or a new piece of software that you're building, AI would allow you to kind of get the version 0 of that application out much quicker than you could before. So that is an opportunity. Now, where there's a challenge is if I have an existing code base or application or platform or project that we built, and it's actually a massive code base, very, very large, very, very complex. The tools that we have today, like Cursor and the likes, are probably really good at summarizing for me information about that project and maybe researching certain things about it. But it's much harder for those agents to make changes that are coherent. As again, it's the same problem that you see with a large GPT prompt, right? Just give a prompt large enough, and then there is a risk of hallucinations, and there is GPT at some point is going to fail on you, not enough tokens, and it's kind of the same idea still kind of plaguing our kind of dev tooling when it comes to AI, that if you have a larger project that you need a bigger context window, that's still a limitation. And there are things that are making it better. We're finding tooling them, making it better. There's new tools that are emerging right now. Our team is experimenting with a bunch of those, which will either kind of give you smarter context management, better ways and more efficient ways to kind of make changes in larger code bases. But that's still evolving. And my takeaway is that even for me, I wanted to standardize before. This is a couple of months ago. I was looking at Cursor. I'm like, guys, this is it. This is the tool we're going to standardize on. We're going to have all of these Cursor rules across the project, and then boom, Claude Code comes. My team I like to kind of give free rein to the team to experiment with things, because once you standardize, then nobody's looking at what's happening outside, and you don't want to be that dinosaur organization. There's a sweet spot between standardization across teams, across projects, and then letting people experiment with tools that maybe make things more efficient. And so from 2 months ago, okay, let's standardize on Cursor, to now I'm like, hold on, there's bunch more tooling that are coming. Each one of them solves a particular problem. There is no standardization. And so now we're like, okay, whoever's on Cursor, keep using that. Now we have people who use Cursor and Claude Code in Cursor. I have people using VS Code. I have, and so the teams and the tooling is still, evolving. And I think it's gonna be like that forever. I don't.
It will never stop. Yeah,
it'll never stop. And I've been doing this for 20 years. It's always been the same game. Like, for us on the technology side, the game is that the technology will change. Maybe every a year, 2, 3, better technologies emerge. What we're seeing now is that pace is much, much, much faster. So if I was gonna adopt something new in every 3 months, now I'm forced to adopt something new every month. And I think it's gonna get shorter and shorter, and that's why I think AI is the answer, in the sense that, if we start from the foundation, what makes a company successful is how fast it can respond to its customer, and what makes a startup successful is because you might not be clear on who the customer is, what is the problem, and how you solve that problem. Essentially, the faster of a tight feedback loop you run between customer, problem, discovery, building features, launching them, testing them with the customer, the faster and tighter that loop is, the more, generally speaking, the more growth trajectory of that company, right? The more success you're gonna see, just by virtue of you being able to do the right things faster than anyone else in the market, and then faster even within your own organization, right? It's, if you want to grow, if you want to get a hockey stick growth in any type of company, it's part of that growth will come from investments, and part of investment in the process and the team to speed things up. And so I think, going back to what I ask myself is, how can I move faster? How can I adopt those toolings faster? And maybe on a daily basis. And I think that's where it's going to be very unique in the coming months. As in the last week, 7 days, there's like 3 models that popped. And so now you're like, okay, wait. So before it was maybe every 6 months, now it's every 3 months, now it's every week. There's like 2, 3 new models that come into play. There's much more tooling. And I think we're also about to see a boom in people kind of building their own software, people build, or organizations with individuals building software for their own use cases. I was with Alex yesterday, and he built a workout timer. And I'm like, wait a minute, so why did you do that? And he's like, dude, like every other timer app on the store is full with ads or laggy or so I decided just throw my own.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's pretty cool, right? And I think there is going to be also that trend of people building their own software. That's going to happen, right? So you might be like, oh, wait, does that mean the developer's roles end? And I would say, not at the moment, but we're going to need a very different development team that do different things than what the developers do today, right? I think today the developers still write code. Maybe like 50% of it is something they would, write custom, and then there's the troubleshooting that you'll have to do and the deployment and. But I think if I jump a year from now, we're going to be writing less code. We're going to be monitoring code that gets written more often, which is very different, right? And essentially your role becomes pretty much more like of a senior role, which is very interesting, because where I think Cursor is today is probably the level of a junior developer. And I literally sent kind of like one of the things I was talking in the engineering meetings is that, hey, treat every Cursor change as a change that is coming from a junior developer. So you're actually going to have to read through it carefully, and ensure that basically whatever gets written actually works with everything else. And you might think, hey, like, do you really need to do that? And I think those who don't do that are up for like some nasty surprises, because the thing that makes it tricky with AI and coding is that there is a lot of code that stays dormant, right? Until you trigger a flow. I'll give you an example that is simple for people to digest, right? Let's just take an example of me trying to log a lead into the CRM, or like create a new patient in, in an EMR. What is tricky is, I might create 15 patients and everything goes well. And then there is specific rules behind the scene that say, if the patient's country of, like maybe if their passport is from this particular country, so they're not like a citizen of, let's say, the US, then, hey, apply all of these rules. Okay? So that code will never trigger until that case is hit. And therefore, let's imagine you have cursor writing code and you're testing the 80%, but there's a 20% of code that nobody looked at, is now in production running, and then what can go wrong? That edge case is going to trigger now, and as opposed to it doing the right behavior, you're triggering errors. So what we see with code written by cursor only without careful supervision is very fragile code. Like, again, they're very similar to the kind of code you'll see out of junior developers. And so to me, that's a symptom that now if I see within our applications more defects than normal, blah, 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 I'm going to dig for, hey, you're probably using cursor, but you're probably not writing enough test cases. You're probably using cursor and you're really not reviewing your code. That is very, very bad.
So this is my last question. We had a moment where everything was paper and everything was done manually. And then computers came in, I guess, I don't know, when did Macintosh come out? The 80s?
Let's go to the 80s when people started to use it for business purpose.
So like business purpose 80s, and computers slowly got adopted. And how much do you think we can look back at the adoption of computers in business and apply that to AI? Do you think we can look at that historically and kind of use that to figure out how AI will take over?
You could, but then you need to multiply that by 4 or 5x or by exponential. Why? Because I think you keep in mind that there are certain aspects about those eras that are no longer true, right? If you think about, let's start from the 80s, right? If you had a computer and you had an advantage, there was no internet. Nobody knew you had a computer and had an advantage. So information didn't travel as fast. And then you go to the 90s where internet started to be in play. Then, people got on the internet and started to learn things, et cetera, et cetera. And then that allowed the message to spread faster, right? And I think in today's, you kind of have to account for today's constantly connected 24/7, everybody knows everything kind of world. And therefore, you just have to multiply by a factor on how fast, right? So if you look at how fast the computers or how fast the internet or how fast the blockchain was adopted, I would look at that and maybe multiply it by 4 or 5x.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good point.
And then kind of update the curve to now. But even that doesn't factor in AI adoption.
Yeah, of course.
And so you kind of basically keep just like, making the curve sharper and sharper and sharper up.
I wasn't even thinking about the blockchain. I mean, the blockchain, realistically, how long did it take for blockchain technology to get pretty widely adopted? It was like 6 years, 7 years?
No, I think, it's been so, crypto started 2005, 2007, right? So I think we still haven't reached not even 40%, 30% maybe adoption. We're not there yet. But there are different limitations when it comes to blockchain than AI. It's, again, one, it's money and there's regulations around it that's much tighter than AI. Two is the fact that the blockchain and the initial, wallets, sites, etc., too clunky, too cumbersome. The blockchain itself too slow. So there was problems that, in my opinion, slowed down adoption in a ridiculous way. And that's why I don't think that's even representative. And that was actually much faster than the internet in terms of adoption.
Yeah. So that's kind of a good point, though. It's like internet, you have like personal computers, internet, blockchain, and now AI. And this is kind of the history of adoption, I would say, from my perspective. of tech. Maybe I'm missing something.
There's a curve for this, Benny. I think it's helpful. We'll tell the guys to bring it on the screen.
Yeah.
But there's the adoption curve. It's a pretty much a bell curve, right? I'll bring it on the screen here. But there's a book called Crossing the Chasm that kind of talks about it. That every technology,
Early adopters, laggards.
exactly. So we'll ask the guys to bring the chart on the screen. But more or less, and this is like super relevant, Benny, to startups, because where I see startups sometimes go wrong is that you take a new product, a new thesis, and you try to run it you try to go into skeptics. So you have to actually be able, one of the most critical jobs of a founder is to ask themselves, who is a good early adopter for my product? Because if you go talk to the laggards and the skeptics in the market, they're going to tell you, man, this is a bad idea. And then you're going to be, oh my God, this is a really bad idea. Versus you going with the same product, with the same idea, to someone who's innovator or visionary in those kind of early segments. This is where you're going to start to find traction. And this is the traction that if you keep executing on it, and if you kind of basically keep the product better, eventually you cross that chasm between the early market and the mainstream, and now you become a mainstream product. And this is where you get kind of the mass adoption. Similarly, when crypto started, when blockchain started, I mean, was only technical people, right? There was no trading when like the first blockchains, you could basically swap between you and your friends. But when I had my first crypto wallet, none of my friends knew what crypto is. And so I'm like, okay, great. So now I have this money, or that I bought. I had 2 BTCs, which is ridiculous now. That I actually, bought books for.
Yeah.
So, and so you're like, okay, great. I have this utility, but there's nothing for me to do, right? And then more people come online. The Binance comes. Coinbase comes, and now basically you have, normies is what we call it in crypto terminology.
Yes.
Now we have normies using, blockchain and Ethereum and trading tokens and playing in DeFi and playing in, GameFi. And so now we have, $3 trillion, $4 trillion industry from, go back to 2007, nobody knew what the heck is BTC.
Yeah, I definitely think crypto should be a next episode. I think we should do crypto. It'll be fun.
Alrighty, Benny. Thank you, sir. This was fun. Enjoyed the conversations. I'll let you go to your friend, and I'll talk to you
enjoy the rest of your week.
We'll talk to you on the. Cheers, bro.
Cheers.
Bye.